Welcome everybody to today's Ideas Seminar. I am absolutely delighted to introduce our guest today, Rotem Guttman, who's coming to us from all the way across Pittsburgh. He's at the Software Engineering Institute, working in the CERT division of it. And his work is very related to our current work on Project Omen, for those of you working on it, because what he's looking at is novel ways to teach. So his background, of course, is in cybersecurity and is in, I'm going to mess up the word, ludological educational techniques. And what he's been doing is developing non-traditional ways to actually teach cybersecurity to various kinds of audiences, whether it's board games in high schools or, live action video games, to soldiers, etc. He's kind of looking out for how can we do this in ways that aren't just PowerPoint. And so what he's going to be talking about today is, of course, how to do this in the area of cybersecurity. Now, the one other thing I want to mention is that in the tradition of always like, what do you want to ask him besides about his work? This is very cool. Talk to him about how he converted his $120 exercise bike so that it could be instrumented and synced up to a virtual reality headset. Okay, talk about a new cool way to ride bikes during the pandemic. With that, Rotem, take it away.
Okay, well, thank you for that introduction. My talk today, you kind of covered the idea. So the title, though, is Dr. Diabolicov How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love Cybersecurity. That'll be a little more apparent as I start going through it, the reasons why. So this is my mandatory disclaimer. I just wanted to also note that the irony is not lost upon me of using PowerPoint to present ways to not use PowerPoint. That being said, who I am, you already gave an excellent introduction. I just wanted to highlight that I am a cybersecurity researcher at SCI in the CERT division. The team I work that I am a part of is our cyber workforce development group. And so we're really focused on, how do we train people in cyber skills. I also have an appointment at the Information Networking Institute, and my focus is on research that touches on that problem from as many different directions as possible. But the real kind of passion project that I've had for many years now is with our lack of cybersecurity professionals. The scale of this lack is just immense. I know I'm probably preaching to the choir with this audience, but estimated this year alone that there's already 3.5 million jobs going unfilled worldwide for cybersecurity professionals. And BLS is estimating that in the next 10 years, this is going to grow another 31%. But the really key statistic that, I have to update these slides every year because it just keeps getting worse and worse. But the key statistic is that, according to ISC Squared's survey, 56% of respondents say their organization is at moderate to extreme risk because of this shortage. Because of this shortage, they're just not able to get a handle on it. And so the question becomes, how do we train these cybersecurity professionals? How do we get enough people into this pipeline in order to actually be able to meet the need? And so what I'd like to do is give you kind of a little cursory walkthrough of a whole bunch of different projects that I've been a part of over the years. But in order to do that, I have to give you a little bit, very brief history of what CWD has done over the years. What our work has looked like, what our group kind of does. And so we have a long history of instructions. This goes back to 1996, where we were literally taking CDs and DVDs, putting them in the mail, original Netflix style, putting them in the mail, sending them out to people. And there was an actual application on there that you would launch, and it would give you content. It would teach you about cybersecurity. This then, as the internet, as bandwidth got better, we started delivering, video content that we were pushing out. Then we started having the capability to actually capture live classroom content and deliver that through these files. That eventually matured into, in 2005, what VTE, the virtual training environment, which became our first actual full learning management system. And that then, the next generation of that became Step Forward, which had its original Flash player back in 2012. Then we moved away from Flash to HTML5, and the features changed. What we were able to deliver changed as we progressed. So I'm going to show just a very brief video here, kind of a walk through history of the work that our group did. And so this is, the original CD, DVD offerings that were kind of mailed out in this custom client.
The world is changing, and the rate of change is accelerating. These changes affect almost all aspects of our lives, from transportation to farming and the factory. The security problems on the internet are perhaps the most frightening. The rate of internet site attacks is growing exponentially. While there are few publicly reported incidents, some losses have run to millions of dollars.
Hello, my name is Raylene Thompson, and welcome to Mulberry Training. This training is intended to familiarize you with Mulberry, which is our supported and recommended email client. You'll notice below me is a table of contents where you can randomly select the topics for today. If you'd like to follow along with me, you can also have Mulberry open while you're viewing this video. In this section, I will discuss attachments. In some cases, you may want to share files using your public or group folder so that you do not exceed your IMAP quota of 100 megabytes.
What to talk about today is our approach at the NSS SEI with respect to dealing with computer network defense in the broadest possible sense, but avoiding to deal with, I'll address later. So what is the top-down approach? The top-down approach, we're talking about something like the due line. The idea here is not to do sensing at a fine level across, for example, the system goes both ways. Now, having said that AirCert is actually designed to cross organizational boundaries.
And so as you can see here, we then moved to an actual learning management system. We're able to do course capture. We're able to start pushing out this content across the internet.
So I'll try to not talk forever. I kind of enjoy this module here. This is the world that I lived in as a systems administrator for quite a while. Those of you that were in our category.
And what's nice here is we started having these assistive features.
Isolation. All right, we talked about minimization. What's isolation allow us to do?
I'm just going to pause that there. These assistive features that where we had full transcripts, where you could just click on the text in the transcript and it would automatically jump to that portion of the transcription. And then further, as we moved on to the HTML5 player,
We'll take a look at how some of these things could impact our security posture as we move forward.
we had
But not much changes in IPv6. We still have wiretapping or sniffing. IPv6 isn't going to prevent.
Thank you, Dennis. Sorry, I don't mean to talk over him. But we had the full transcription. We could still jump to different elements, but you could focus on different elements, be the instructor or the content that they are displaying. Now, one of the things that you'll notice as we take this walk through time, the video quality constantly improves, right? We're constantly able to capture richer and better quality of the video content. And then the diversity of the content improves as we have a bigger corpus, a bigger library of material. And the assistive features that we're able to support kind of tend to oscillate. They get better and better and better. And then we move to a new platform and we kind of wipe the slate clean. And then we just, you're just trying to get it working. And then once you get it working, you start adding back in these assistive features. But one thing that remained constant throughout basically all of that is the underlying paradigm through which we're instructing is there's an instructor that instructs and students that listen, hopefully. And the problem is that that kind of limits us in the way in which students we can reach, how well we can reach them, and what types of content we can deliver to them. And the classical approach here is one of this kind of cyclical approach, which we're probably all familiar with. You start with knowledge building, you lecture at the students, they just listen to you and you just tell them the concepts that they need to know. And then you move on to skill building. Then you show the students how to do it. You go into a lab, you pull up your screen and you do the thing and show it to your students, and they somewhat passively consume this. Then you move on to experience building. Now you give the lab to them, or you have an exercise that they can maybe participate in together where they do the thing that you just showed them how to do. And then you have the evaluation, where you have some sort of examination where you test to see, did they learn the thing that you were trying to teach them, and then you go right back into knowledge building. Now you show them the next thing, and you keep going and building on that over and over again, and you repeat the cycle. Well, what I'm focused on, the kind of crux of my research, where I come into this picture, is my interest is in moving away from that paradigm and into immersive learning. How do we take all of those steps, combine them together, and build something that's greater than the sum of its parts? How do we build something that really engages students, that works for different kinds of learners, and that really can pull a lot more motivation out of participants rather than sitting in a classroom for hours on end? And so the kind of first stab we had at that was our first look at doing immersive instruction. I'm sorry, I got it. I apologize in advance. I have this awful habit of getting ahead of my slides. So let me just jump ahead of this one. So the first chance that we really had to look at doing this type of instruction was with this industry consortium that we had. They had this training that I had an opportunity to go and observe a previous iteration of as they delivered it. And this was, a several day long training, 8 to 10 hours a day for 3 days. And the problems that I observed weren't technical problems. It wasn't that the content wasn't good. It was excellent content that was being delivered to them from a technical standpoint. But there were the two key problems in this particular audience was that all of the participants, they weren't new trainees learning how to do something for the first time. These were individuals that were already in their roles, right? And the things that they were going to be doing and being evaluated on, their evaluations were going to be available to their superiors. And so everything became an argument. Everything became an indictment of them. You couldn't tell them, oh, hey, you did something, what you did here wasn't the best way of going about it. All they would hear is, you don't know how to do your job, and we're going to tell your boss. And so they immediately become defensive. Instead of internalizing what you try to show them and kind of being able to say, oh yeah, maybe that's a better way of going about it, they would immediately latch on to even minor differences between the simulated environment or the training environment and their work environment. And so the most common thing is, well, that's not how it would be in the real world. That's not how it would be in the office. Even on the most extreme example I ever heard was one where a participant said, well, my desktop at work is a different color, and the alert was the same color as the background, so I didn't notice it, but at work it would have jumped out to me. And so there's a certain point where you're like, okay, I'm sorry, I can't perfectly replicate what you have at every different organization when I have participants coming in from all over the world. And the second thing was, I noticed that participants weren't engaged. The first module of the day, everybody was engaged, everybody was listening, but by halfway through the day, I clocked every 17 minutes, somebody would interrupt and be like, can we have a bio break, or can we have a break for some food? Or they just very limited in how long they could keep doing this, because this was dense, very technical content being delivered for hours and hours on end, for days on end. And so I had the opportunity to help redesign that content. And this was our first foray into this immersive training. So I want you to take a moment and imagine, historically until now, you've been getting invitations to this consortium, come spend 3 days in Pittsburgh, sitting in a classroom doing this training. And now you get a new invitation, and this is what shows up in your email inbox. And so now what we have is this environment that we've created that has a bunch of different features that address the issues that we had. So first of all, we've created a semi-fantastic setting that we're going to put the participants in. And we created a series of these scenarios that we call the cyber heroes scenarios. And so by putting them in this semi-fantastic setting, we immediately ask them to suspend disbelief. You know, we're saying you're a special agent of a world, you know, a superhero, essentially, organization that is trying to save the world from these global threats. And so the phrase, well, that's not how it is at the office, just immediately leaves your mind. And when we say, well, here's another way you could have approached that, here's something you could have done, they're a lot more open and willing to internalize that and then take that back to the office with them, because we've put them in a scenario where we're not talking about you, we're talking about special agent you. And just all of those conversations were gone. The way that the conversations happened completely changed in their tenor. But beyond that, I'll give my favorite example from this first engagement where I knew that we had hooked them. I knew that we had that engagement. We had 17 minutes between requests for breaks in the previous mode of instruction. We created the scenario and we made it really immersive. We put all of this video content in there. We gave them a live environment where things were happening. They were all sitting in front of computers in the classroom, engaged in all this, and they had a catered lunch available to them that was going to be halfway through the day. Along with that catered lunch, there were copies of, I believe it was the New York Times, the Pittsburgh, Post-Gazette, and then we actually created a third newspaper that was a fictional newspaper where all the articles were content as if stuff that was happening that day in the scenario that we were watching. And there was actually, because this consortium had a large intel aspect to it, there's actually content in those news articles in the newspaper that was useful to them in the scenario that they were working through. Well, this was all good, except for they were all so engaged in the scenario that, we announced, hey, lunch is served, everybody went, nothing, nobody gets up. They're all working, we're doing stuff, we're busy. Finally, they had self-organized into 3 teams that were, kind of tiger teams working on different parts of the problem. And so each team sent one person to go make plates for everybody and bring it back into the classroom so they could eat while they were working. And that's when I knew they were hooked, except for there was one problem. The first 2 go and they both come back with a big pile of plates and sit down. And I'm like, oh God, nobody's going to notice the newspaper. Like, it's not critical, but I really we put a lot of work into that. And we were thankfully saved when the third one of the third group comes running back in with no plates and the whole stack of newspapers going, hey, everybody look, and starts distributing them. So it worked out well, but that's when I knew they were hooked, because even the food wouldn't pull them away. And so here I'm going to, this was actually what you just saw was one of the scenarios. This is another scenario that we used from the Cyber Heroes scenario. So this is literally what they saw when they sat down. They arrived in the classroom after their teaser. They sit down, and before we talk to them, before anything, this is kind of their introduction as soon as they get settled for how they start the event that they're going to be a part of. Oh, helps if I hit play.
Welcome. You've been selected as the newest agents for the Armor Cyber Heroes Initiative. You will be joining teams tasked with responding to global cyber threats as they emerge. Over the course of the next few days, you will receive extensive briefings on Armor policies and Just a moment. Yes? Yes, I'm with them right now. All right? Yeah, bring it here. Agents, change of plans. It appears your skills are needed immediately. There will be time later for going over your benefits package. This video was just posted to 5chan, and I'm assigning your teams to investigate it.
Governments of the world, its message is not for you. For too many years, the corrupt world powers have stifled and exploited their people. Today, I give the people the opportunity press the reset button on humanity. I have placed vials of weaponized smallpox in several key locations around the globe. I leave it to the people to decide the smallpox will be released. Linked in this post is a tool that will allow any individual to place their vote to reset civilization or preserve it. If I suspect any interference on the part of any government, I will immediately trigger the smallpox's release. You have 2 days to make your decision. I leave it in the hands of the people.
And so they immediately got dropped into the scenario where now, we gave them that tool. They started doing reverse engineering. We gave them a bunch of intel documents, and they started trying to figure out what's going on here. There was a lot of moving pieces. We actually created more than 400 different intel artifacts for that, as well as we actually had a team standing by that was responding to requests for information. So as individuals were like, oh, well, can you get us this? We were actually drawing up personnel dossiers and translated documents. We had documents in multiple languages. And so it was really kind of this really different way for them to experience the training and exercise the skills that they had. Oh. I need to do that. Let's go to the next slide. There we go. So after that, coming off of that success, we saw this type of training, we saw some really good results. How could we leverage this further? And so the next project that I got involved with was actually a cyberkinetic project of how do we train integrating combined arms, so having your cyber operators working with your kinetic operators. And so we actually created this prototype capability that allowed a team of kinetic operators to actually go and move about in a simulated battlefield and go and execute missions, while cyber operators operated in a cyber battlefield, but everything propagated back and forth. So if I go into a building control system and go and cut the power to the lights turn off. If I go and put a satchel charge on a power plant, a power substation in a village, and blow up the power substation, all the power goes out, and my cyber operator that was hacked into that system suddenly loses his connection because that system turns off. Or any other myriad of capabilities of this kind of integrated environment. So let's take a look at that.
The CERT Advanced Cyberkinetic TTP simulation system is designed to seamlessly integrate a cyber simulation environment with kinetic operations conducted within a virtual battlefield simulator. Here we can see on the left an OP4 cyber operator disabling a drone system within the STEP interface. On the right, we see the drone operator's view within the battle simulator. As the link is disabled, the drone operator system ceases to function. In this particular scenario, enemy forces are holding a high-value target as a hostage. To support the hostage rescue mission, cyber operators compromise the enemy's security camera system and determine where she is being held, as well as enemy troop positions. Now that the hostage's location has been confirmed, special operators move in to rescue the hostage under the cover of darkness. Unfortunately, their progress is stymied by searchlights installed around the enemy facility. To support the kinetic operations, cyber operators must disable power to the facility's lighting systems. Here we see a cyber operator leveraging an attack within our STEP environment to do just that. As the system is turned off, the effect propagates into the battlefield simulator and allows our troops to neutralize the enemy forces and move into the facility and rescue the hostage. All infrastructure systems within the Blue 4 base and the Outcore facility are fully replicated within the STEP environment, allowing them to be attacked just as they would in the real world. By combining the cyber and kinetic domains, the ACT system allows operators in both fields to gain an understanding of the capabilities granted and restraints imposed upon the operations by their counterparts. Additionally, combined arms training and mission rehearsal can now be accomplished without resorting to white carding effects. The increased motivation provided by ACTS-enabled training cannot be ignored. Engagement by the training audience is greatly increased as they feel they are supporting a live mission and can connect emotionally with the task at hand. The CERT Advanced Cyberkinetic TTP simulation system .
Sorry. There we go. And so that kind of takes us ahead to, now we in that loop that we're discussing earlier. You can see we're on that tail end of the loop, right? So this allows us to not only do allow hands-on experience for the participants, but we can also build the evaluation criteria into their exercises. At the end of the day, did you rescue the hostage? What systems were you able to compromise? What were you able to do? What parts of your job role were you successful with, and where did you struggle? Maybe you know how to do all of your technical skills. You're fantastic at that because that's what we've been training until now, but your communication skills leave something to be desired. And so there was actually a misunderstanding between you and the ground forces, and they ended up going one way and you weren't prepared for what they were asking you to do. Well, great. That's the kind of thing we want to be able to highlight and train towards. But now, as we bring that cycle, slowly working kind of backwards along that cycle, is now we want to actually teach you the skills so that you can gain those skills as a part of the course. And so I had an opportunity to start working on that end of it, actually, with my other hat, as part of my work with the Carnegie Mellon's Information Networking Institute. So I'm the instructor for the Cyber Forensics and Incident Response Capstone at the INI. Any INI students watching this right now, I'm going to be vague about some stuff here, so you're not getting any answers for the course. You don't have to watch through all this video with bated breath. That being said, because of COVID, we had to move to this completely different way of teaching the course. Traditionally, this course was, another course where you had an instructor instructing and students listening, hopefully. And so I took the opportunity to completely redesign the course. We got rid of the lecture component almost entirely. We have one lecture on the first day of classes, and that's just to explain to the students how this course is going to be managed, because they're used to lecture. That's what kind of their default. And so that first lecture we just use in order to explain to the students, here's what we're actually going to be doing. The entire course is now, there's no traditional exams. It is entirely asynchronous. And again, you'll see the video content that's produced for this is a little bit less polished because it was literally just me with a webcam and a microphone and my green screen here. I created it on my own at minimal cost, but it really the reason I like to highlight this is it goes to show that this type of teaching can be created without the full, the infrastructure and the resources that we thankfully have here at SCI, but this type of teaching can be done as long as you kind of think in that paradigm. And so the way that, I don't want to get ahead of my slides, so I'm going to give you the little introduction that the students got kind of as a teaser that was posted to their course website before the first class, and then I'll kind of give a more in-depth of how it runs. Greetings, I'm President Ater from the glorious nation of Ambrosia. I'm sure you've heard a lot about our beautiful country already, but I'm here to announce that Ambrosia is open for visitors. With over 11 kilometers of beaches to explore, you'll be able to relax in the sand, kick back, and enjoy your vacation in peace and quiet. Don't believe the rumors. We've had more than 10 years without civil unrest, and not a single... What? No, that doesn't count. That was barely a riot. They didn't even have... With over 3 years of peace and quiet, as our compassionate government provides for... What? God, what? Where did we even get this director from? Is he from the History Channel? Our peaceful atmosphere has been uninterrupted for as long as anyone can remember. Just ask any citizen on the street and they'll gladly tell you so. So come on over on any one of our 3 magnificent, modern, and luxurious ferry boats and see for you... What now? Sunk? How? Oh. A wave hit it? At sea? Chance in a million. So come on over on either of our magnificent, luxurious cargo ferries and see for yourself. The island of Ambrosia, a vacation here is truly a taste of the divine.
Are you a digital forensics specialist? Are you looking for a change of scenery? The glorious nation of Ambrosia is proud to announce a lucrative career opportunity. Come and work directly for the Leadership Council of the Free Republic of Ambrosia. Employment boasts extremely competitive wages, comprehensive health care, including vision and dental benefits, relocation assistance, and accommodation in our luxurious government housing compounds. With no rent to pay, all meals included, and flexible work hours, You'll be able to truly enjoy your free time in our beautiful island paradise. You might even find that you'll never want to leave again. Inquire at republicofambrosia.com.
And so, sorry, there we go. And so the way that the course, that was, by the way, all made with free assets. I made sure to note them there. But the students organize themselves into investigative teams. And at the start of it, there's a triggering event. I can, in the interests of not spoiling too much for any students that watch this, I'll say that the triggering event is some shady dealings that this quasi-dictatorship has been undergoing got leaked. And so they're trying to find where the mole or moles are, where the leaks are coming from. And so the students are put into this kind of situation where they have this mission to go on, and this is the capstone course. So they've already completed several classes on basic skills, but the basic technical skills. But now we're trying to teach them, how do you run an investigation? How do you bring those skills together? How do you manage large amounts of evidence? And so the way that we do that is we actually have weekly meetings with their supervisors and or witnesses. I literally have different costume changes and different. That's actually why I have this lower third name that I use, because I can swap out which individual I'm playing at that moment. And through those meetings, I can give them advice. I can teach them in character the skills and the abilities, and give them the advice that they need as they're moving through to optimize what they're doing. And so they have, a supervisor who's more technically knowledgeable. They have witnesses that they can question. And so we can actually build the learning into part of the experience. Then beyond that, one of the goals of that class is to help them improve their ability to convey their findings, because that's something they don't get in any of their prerequisite classes. And so they have both written and verbal reports that they have to give. So presentations to their management, updates, progress updates that they have to give, and then final reports of findings that then all leads into, actually, we have essentially mock hearings for the second half of the semester, where they take that report that they found, and now they have to actually practice testifying. So I'm going to try and speed up in the interest of time here, because we still have a couple of things. This is probably the crowning achievement of this, the ludological techniques and this type of instruction. Executive Order 13870 was signed, which created the President's Cup Cybersecurity competition. The goal of the competition was to find and reward the best cyber talent in the federal workforce, both individuals and teams. And so, this was Department of Homeland Security got tasked with this, specifically CISA. And so it was this new competition, first of its kind. Nobody had done anything like this before on this, especially not at this scale. Right, so you're talking the entire federal workforce can compete in this, and now we're trying to find in this particular case that I was focused on, the best team out of the entire federal workforce. And thankfully, CISA was willing to take. It was a risk. There was nothing to prove that this could be done this way, but CISA was willing to take the chance and try something really new and innovative. And so what we created with CISA was what eventually became the finals client for the team's competition, that really allows us to create team-based challenges where we're not just asking you to exercise some cyber skills and doing some question and answer or challenge based environments, but we're actually putting you into a real immersive environment that asks the team to work together as a team. So we're not just finding the 5 best individuals. Those 5 individuals might not be number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 best individuals, but they are the best team together. And so this is actually the I'll give the teaser first for this competition. And so what you were able to see there is, so what we created was this full 3D video game environment that is the world that they were inhabiting. Let me go to the next slide. Where we created this fictitious government agency, the DRTF, the Disaster Relief Task Force. The reason we went with something fictitious is that the actual competitors were teams from all over the federal government, and so we didn't want them to be, to show any favoritism, right, to one group or another, because you might have a team from, Department of Defense, a team from the FBI, a team from the Department of Treasury, like from all over the place. So you don't want to put them in the role of one team or another. And then the two abstractions that we created in order to, allow this game world to function was the RADs. These are the remote access droids, which they really provided an avatar for the competitors that they could use to maneuver within this environment. And then we created these little fictitious things, these little moths, which stands for multiple object tethering hardware. And they had wings, they look like moths, and they would go and allow you to, plug into different devices, and then in your RAD interface, actually get a console on that device. And now you could literally walk up to a computer, moth it, and now it's like you're sitting in front of that computer yourself. You can then get up, walk someplace else, and go interact with that computer. And so this is actually, I'm going to show you the briefing that they got, both of the scenario that they were put into and how the tools work. And you'll see that, like, it's not sitting down and instructing them. It's not telling them, it's literally just giving them, here's where you are, here's what's going on, and then putting them into that environment.
Welcome to the Disaster Relief Task Force, DRTF, application. A winter superstorm has hit the East Coast, damaging important infrastructure. Due to freezing temperatures and blizzard conditions, people's lives are at risk, and we've been authorized to provide any support we can. Using this interface, your team will work with local agencies to mitigate the superstorm's effects and prevent further damage. Your task force has been assigned to a city. We have a briefing prepared for you with details regarding the latest operational instructions for our remote access droid, RAD 9000. Your mission tasks can be accessed from the DRTF application, alongside local news coverage, task force updates, and weather changes. Until conditions improve, your RADs are the only way to access the hardest hit areas. It's up to you to accomplish as many tasks as you can as quickly as possible. Welcome to the Disaster Relief Task Force orientation. As a new employee, you will need to remember these 3 easy steps. Step 1. Telepresence with a RAD. This is a remote access droid, or RAD, the device that you'll use to move around locations otherwise out of reach. You will choose a RAD to log into at the beginning of each module. Please note, the RADs are sometimes located in different rooms with different areas they can access. You can exit RADs at any time by pressing Escape. Step 2. Cyber access with a moth. To access computing devices in these remote locations, your RADs are equipped with moth devices, or multiple object tethering hardware. You may access the console of any device that you or another DRTF team member has deployed an active moth to, via the MothNet, a list of all moths that have been deployed, which can be accessed by pressing M in any module. However, the MothNet is limited to moths in your current module and cannot access moths in the other modules. Step 3. Complete your mission. Once a moth is deployed, you will be able to access the machine at any time through the MothNet and execute your missions. Thank you for listening.
So we created this excellent simulation environment where competitors were able to execute their missions. They were able to go in and compete. And we chose this winter superstorm as the scenario expressly because the competition was scheduled for the summer. And the one thing we didn't want to have happen is have some real world event happen right around the same time and then have people, be concerned or, have any effects of that. So of course, COVID happened and the event got delayed because of COVID. And I don't know if anybody heard about a recent winter storm. Well, that happened the week before the competition. So if anything that we learned from that is, don't ever assume anything. as far as what the real world will throw at you. But beyond just the actual superstorm, we created a series of challenges for that competition. One was a data center that, because of the storm, couldn't be accessed, and so they had to use there was a crane that collapsed. They weren't certain about the stability of the building, so they used the RADs. It was the only safe way to access it, and they needed to get services back up in this municipal data center. Of course, shortly thereafter, we had an actual event where something like that happened. Shortly after we had already designed that scenario, we had created a scenario where a hospital was hit by a malware attack, and so they deployed these RADs to try and get the hospital up and running again during this storm. We had pipes burst, and so actually, out of all 5 scenarios that we created as part of this competition, similar real-world events ended up happening after we had already designed the scenarios. And so it really went to show how realistic the environment was, even if it was sometimes kind of awkward for us. But the best part about this is about the way that things played out is we hadn't originally planned this for the COVID reality. Obviously, we didn't know what was coming when we were first building this. But because of the way that we administer this, when we had to move to fully remote, all of our environment was already designed to be scalable, already designed to allow participants to connect in however they needed to. So we were able to make a simple transition into delivering this in the cloud. And I say simple only because several of my coworkers moved heaven and earth in order to make this happen. But the infrastructure was able to be implemented because of this design where there was no on-premises, instructor giving tests. There was nobody examining. It was all built into the environment where the execution and the evaluation were one and the same, because we're really just asking you to go do a mission, and we're tracking what you're doing in the mission in order to evaluate you. And so this is how it played out here. Actually, I wanted to already have this playing while I was talking, but that's fine. There we go. And so what you're seeing here is actually a team of 5 of the competitors that were actually competing. This is kind of our view on the back end of what it looked like. And so as they actually went through, and I believe actually this was the winning team that ended up winning the President's Cup, as they're actually going through and navigating through multiple scenarios. So in the lower left there, you can see somebody in that data center looking at a power control panel and accessing machines, trying to get the correct machines up and running. While on the top left, one of the individuals is actually where there was a burst pipe and they have to reconfigure a bunch of networking equipment. And so just because I'm well over time, I'm going to skip ahead on this one. But the one thing I wanted to highlight is we actually had some excellent live stream
and issues and challenges.
content. So there's a 6-hour live stream that CISA hosted that I think if you're interested in seeing the execution, please go and watch it. They did an excellent job.
This was done months ago. But again, this is real. I mean, people need help.
And so this is where, Dr. Carly, I'll ask you. I know, should we stop here for Q&A and I can cover the board game if there's interest, or shall I continue? Because I want to make sure there's time for discussion. The 5th item that I kind of wanted to showcase is a board game that I designed that was expressly designed because of kind of this problem. We have the pipeline problem that it's been my personal goal to address as much as possible. But I saw these 2 statistics that really struck me. This was back in 2004. 78% of college students decided on what they wanted to study back in high school. But 82% of the individuals interviewed said nobody in high school, not a teacher, guidance counselor, nobody ever mentioned a career in cybersecurity to them. And so the problem kind of became of like, okay, we're doing all these interventions trying to get these, these undergraduates to go and become cybersecurity professionals, but they already have in their head what they want to do by this point. And so now you're trying to change their mind, essentially, instead of trying to have them decide on this to start with. And so the question became, why don't we start targeting them, at a younger age? And so the answer that I always got is like, well, how are we going to talk cybersecurity to somebody who doesn't know anything about networking, doesn't know anything about programming, probably doesn't even know how to use a computer beyond, normal user tasks, maybe playing a video game. how are we going to even talk to them? We can't. Now, I never accept the answer of we can't. So the answer is, how do we reach a younger audience? I want to go into middle school even, or younger. How do we reach a younger audience? We simplify, we gamify, we integrate with their educators. We get it into the classroom. We get it into their play spaces so that it becomes something fun for them to do that they can understand at their level. And so that was kind of the genesis of this board game, Three Envelopes. And it requires no knowledge of programming, no knowledge of networking, introduces key concepts of cybersecurity and risk management, and explicitly showcases a variety of career options that as part of the gameplay, you already learn about them. And so I'll just give a quick example. Essentially, every participant gets a board. You're the CEO of a company, and so this is your company's board. And as part of this board, you have, your starting income, your IT infrastructure, your operational infrastructure, and your business development group. And so we can customize these boards. I have boards for, energy, software development, finance, whatever sector you want to be in. We have this board, and then we have the second half of your board is another board. That's the player aid board. Technically, you don't even need this board in order to play the game. The goal of this board, though, is it lowers the cognitive load on the player. Essentially, every company has 4 attributes to it. It's technical controls, it's physical security, it's policies and procedures, and it's overall security awareness of the personnel. And so instead of having players, jot that down and track it on a piece of paper or have tokens or whatever, you just have a cube that sits on each one of these. It has a starting value that's different depending on what your industry is. So, if you're in the entertainment industry, you're a movie studio, you have a bunch of sets and stuff. Yeah, your physical security is probably pretty good. You can't just walk into the closed set and start taking stuff. But at the same time, your technical controls from a cybersecurity perspective maybe aren't quite as mature as the software development house. Sure. And so you have a different starting posture depending on what your industry you're in. And so you just kind of put those blocks on the board, and that sets you where you start. And then as you play through the game, the players are either the CEO, if they're playing alone, or if they're playing together as a team, they play as the board of directors. And then each turn, they have to choose one of 3 actions: either make an investment, remediate their network if they're already infected, or continue on with business as usual. And so what happens is the players get dealt a hand of cards. So they get dealt this series of cards where each card is something that they can invest in. Be it, in this case, I can hire an incident response team, or I can hire security guards, or I can sponsor a conference, or I can invest in a whole disk encryption solution for all of the computers in my network, or I can buy an IDS system for my network. I have all these options of investments that I can make. And so my choice is either take the invest action, which is I pick one of those, and they have on the top left there, they have an initial cost and a recurring cost. So maybe I want to hire an incident response team. So that's going to cost me, sorry, it's really small on my screen. So just look, what is that? 6 million as the initial cost and 6 million as the recurring cost. So that's, having a full incident response team year round, each quarter is going to cost me, for my scale of organization, $6 million. And payroll, as it tends to be, tends to be a recurring thing. You stop paying people, they stop showing up for work. And so that's kind of the overall cost for maintaining that team for me. So maybe I decide I want to do that. So I take that card, I add it to my board. It's a blue card, so I add it to the blue IT section of my board. I take 6 million out of my, the money that I have. I put it in the bank. And that's I take the remaining cards. So the 6 cards that remain out of those 7, I bundle those up. I hand it to the player on my left. The player on my right then hands that to me. This is what we call a drafting style game for anybody that's familiar with any of them. Dominion, Drafting Magic, you name it. There's a ton of 7 Wonders. And so they choose not only what they're picking, but also what they're handing off to the next player. So there's some strategy involved here. Their other option is if their network is already infected. So I don't know if you noticed on the card here, there's a compromise section on the lower right there. So if there's a token there where they've already been compromised, they can instead sacrifice one of these picks, just take the pick and put it in the discard pile instead of adding it to their board. And that represents spending this turn, instead of either doing your normal business or investing in something new, you're shutting down operations and cleaning up your network. Like everything's on fire. We can't operate like this. We have to fix remediate the compromise. And so you kind of give up this opportunity to do something else and instead, clean up your act, essentially. And then the third option is business as usual. Again, you pick a card and you put it in the discard pile, so you don't get to add anything new, but you get essentially some money. This is, I'm short on liquid cash, on liquid assets. So I'm just going to focus on building up some capital this turn. And that's kind of a Hail Mary play where you get into a bad situation. Your incoming cash flows aren't handling it. And so you kind of have to burn a turn on money. But then, so you go around, you do this until at the end, you end up with two, you have 7, then 6, then 5, then 4, then 3, then 2. When you have 2 cards left, you don't pass to somebody a pick of choose any one of these one. So your last 2, you pick one, and then the one that you don't pick goes in the discard pile. So at the end of that round, there's 3 of these rounds, but at the end of that round of investment, then comes the events round. So, the classic saying, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans, is there's a randomly shuffled deck of events that get dealt out. And then all of the events occur to all of the people at the same time. So in this case, we're all going to get hit with a cyber extortion threat. And so the important parts here is that, sorry, I'm looking at my other screen so I can see it larger, is that every one of these events has both something that it can just outright prevent it. So, if I invested in DDoS prevention system, in a DDoS prevention system, and now I get this threat, hey, we're going to take down your website with a DDoS, I can just ignore it and I'm probably going to be okay. And so if I had bought that card, now I get to ignore this event. But again, because it's all random, I didn't know this event was coming. There's a big deck of them and the different ones appear every game. So you have to kind of balance your investments. But then we also sorry, I skipped it, but we give context. This is really important for the players that don't know about this. So we say, criminals threaten to disrupt your website and prevent customers from reaching it during important marketing events unless their ransom is paid. And then there's a little kind of caveat here. You have -5 to your technical controls during this event if your network is compromised. So if the criminals are essentially already in your network, your technical controls are less effective for the purpose of this event. And these are all inspired by real world events. And so assuming that you don't have the thing that flat out prevents it, what varies, because the same event happens to all the different players at the same time, what varies is how it affects your company. And what's going to determine those effects is your specific security posture based on what you invested in. Because each one of those cards, sorry, I didn't call this out explicitly, each one of those cards you invested in has different effects to your security control, to your security posture. Be that this gives you additional technical controls, this gives you additional physical security, additional security awareness. You sent everybody out onto trainings, etc., or they might have special effects. And so each card has 3 things, either prevented. So here's what happens if you can prevent it. So in this case, if your technical controls are high enough, you have the tech in there to prevent this DDoS, you just ignore it. They can't damage you. Great. Or mitigated is, okay, something kind of bad happens, but it's not the end of the world. Or exposed, which is just you're not set up to handle this event, and you just eat the worst case scenario, essentially. And so naturally, different strategies are developed from just as I watch different groups play this. There's the show me the money players. They ignore their technical controls. They ignore their everything, and they just take every business development card they can. They research new product lines. They buy marketing campaigns. They buy business leads. They buy basically every yellow card they can, try to get as much money as possible, because the goal of the game is to make the most money. You win at the end of the game if you have the most money. And then they come around to their first events phase, and they just are completely exposed to everything. They developed a new product line. All the specs got stolen. They're being, in a foreign country, they're producing cheap knockoffs before you even get to market. All of your business leads are off at your competitor. They have all copies of everything. They just get annihilated, and they get this really visceral, they always spend the rest of the game just buying every security control they can. They're heavily invested, but they never quite make it up the hit that they've already taken. Then you have the security lockdown. This I've seen whenever I give actual cybersecurity professionals the opportunity to play this game. the first time they play through it, they fully invest. They hire an incident response team, and they buy an IDS. They have whole disk encryption. They have everything locked down fantastically, right up until the next phase, which I haven't talked about yet. But the next phase is actually the income phase, and then after that, the upkeep phase. So they buy all this stuff, and they forget, hey, you're a business. Then they get around to actually, they hired this incident response team, but now they can't make payroll because they don't have enough money. And then they have to fire all of them, and they lose them. And so again, they kind of eat it in the first couple of turns, and then they kind of are behind and have trouble catching up. Whereas the kind of most successful strategy, and this is by design, is having a balanced portfolio, trying to balance your security investments with building your business, and kind of taking a balanced view, a holistic view of maintaining that business. And so that kind of what leads to the most success. And what you see is over time, if people get to play this multiple times, they kind of just learn that natively through playing the game. And then hearing a conversation between, I literally had this, hearing a conversation between 12-year-olds who have no concept of networking, no concept of programming, have never heard of cybersecurity concepts, and hearing them having a reasoned discussion where one of them is saying, well, we need to buy an IDS system. Another one saying, no, we need to invest in security auditors so we know what's wrong ahead of time. And a third one saying, well, that's all well and good, but we don't have the budget for that right now. So we need to invest in advertising. And just listening to that, I'm just sitting as a fly on the wall being like, this is my success. The fact that they can have a reasoned conversation about these concepts of why this has value versus that having value without having to learn all the underlying technology, that's a win for me. And I'll tell you, one of the things I don't like to say too loudly, but the two audiences that I found this works best with is middle schoolers to early high schoolers and C-level executives. And I'll let you take your own inferences from that. But it's really, they don't need to understand all of the underlying tech, all the underlying concepts. They can still have the reasoned discussion. So that's where I'll stop and open it up for QA. I know I've definitely run over time, but hopefully we have some of you that can stick around and converse.
So I did have a question. Also, just a comment, Professor Carly had to go teach her class, so she's logged off. So what types of game design strategies would you recommend for a game where it's like a train as you work framework, where the participants are learning the software tools that they will eventually have to use on their job? So train as you work scenario.
So it's, first of all, just to be clear, we always aim, you say train as you work, DoD, train as you fight. And it's kind of the underlying philosophy that we have for our trainings. And so what I would actually flip it and say, when I design any one of these gamified experiences, I start with, what are my specific training objectives? So what is it that the specific skills that I need to teach? Then I try to organize them. Is there any dependencies, right? Are there skills that have to come first in order for them to be able to pick up other skills? So for the example that you give, there's a piece of software that they need to learn how to use. Is there, another piece of software that they need to be pulling data from in order to use that? Or is there some business practices that they need to be aware of before they're allowed to use the software? So I kind of build my hierarchy, and then I start designing a scenario, an experience where I can now allow them to interact with it. I'll give a perfect example. That scenario that I kind of showed the teaser for at the start with the, what's real, what's not. We actually, that was for an environment where they had preparatory training that they were supposed to have already completed on basic Unix command line. How do I use the Unix command line? How do I do basic commands? And then what we did is we had them sit down with, welcome to an interview. Welcome. So you're interviewing to be a member of Armor, Armor team. So I've seen your resume. It looks very impressive. So good luck on joining the team. Just come with me, and we'll get you to your interview. And then the interviewer, this is all in a virtualized environment, He stands up, he walks out of the room, and the door closes behind him, and the door is locked. You're locked in a room, and all there is in the room is the chair, the desk he was sitting at. He accidentally left his cell phone there. He accidentally, left his computer logged in, and so you actually, the only things you have in that room are these things that you can interact with. And on the cell phone, you can find additional credentials. On the computer, it's just a Unix command line, right? And so it's Linux, but if you go and poke around, the only thing you have access to is his home directory. The only thing in there is a script that, if you run it, it gives you helpful output. And then what you realize is that script allows you to open the door, right? But the key thing is, if you don't have really the basic skills of just being able to operate at the command line there that you're expected to have for this training, we're already testing you through the environment, see if you can get out. Now, if you give up, there's a timer where, like, after a set amount of time, if you can't get out, another door opens, and it's basically like, oh, well, you didn't pass your interview. Come back when you're ready, and that actually kicks them back out into that preparatory training that they were supposed to have done, puts them back in that training, so they can do that again. However, if they get the door open, they run this command, they get the door open, then outside there, depending on how long it took them to do it, then they actually get put into different kind of introductory levels of where they're going to start out. Then we take them from that into, okay, welcome to the forensic. It's a forensic position. So welcome to the forensics team. We have an ongoing investigation. Most of the stuff's already checked out, but we have some, low value stuff that we don't think is important. So there's another person there in the lab that can then offer them instruction if they need it, and will kind of help them through the initial use of that tool. And then through that initial use, they find a piece of evidence that they then unlocks the next step of the investigation. And so kind of it naturally handholds them for the particular skills that we need them to have at each kind of gated moment.
Okay, thanks. That was helpful.
So there was a question in chat, but because I got disconnected, I've lost the chat log.
Okay.
So,
I can ask you those questions, Rotem. They're from Danny Oppenheimer, who had to jump off. And he's got 3 questions in here.
I'll try one at a time.
Okay. Wondering if you have any assessment of the efficacy of these specific tools in terms of actual real-world outcomes.
Yes and no. Yes, we have several. I can't go into all the details for different ones because of different customers. I can say that overall, I will say the more you can measure what your educational goals are before we start designing it, the better the outcome. And so I would absolutely say that, if at all possible, before you create your gamified training environment, make sure that you have good instrumentation of the legacy environment. Make sure that you can already collect the data on the specific learning objectives for what you're designing, and then be able to create, because just over time, what I found works best, be able to create, even if it's just completely, pen and paper. Like this is the first design of basically every gamified environment, even the full President's Cup, 3D video game with dozens of competitors interacting, all started with pieces of paper and cardboard and a marker. And so put your participants into that environment and collect the metrics, see how well that works there. Because if you can do that, you can refine your design and iterate as you're developing, not at the end. And so I don't want to give the what I found doesn't work is build the thing, then test it, which is kind of what we as academics, tend to do a lot of the time is, we have this hypothesis, then we test the hypothesis. It's great, but the end result is a lot better if we can constantly be testing as we're building.
Thanks. The second question you had here is, does the board game actually get more kids to enter careers in cybersecurity?
So here I will fully caveat that this is only anecdotal. But from the plays that I've had of the board game, I know for a fact I've added 3 more to the pipeline that I am personally aware of. One of which is finishing Stanford this year. Very happy about that. One of which the parent actually tracked me down and tracked me down during a graduation ceremony from high school, and I had no context to it. And literally, the parent just pulled me aside and was like, "Hey, you're the guy that made that made that board game that all our kids had to play, right?" And so, and like in that tone of voice, and I'm like, yes, I like fully expecting an angry response. And he was like, completely changed my kid's career goals. He wanted to be a video game developer, and then he decided, cybersecurity was his thing, and now he's in the pipeline. So I can tell you only from anecdotal evidence, it seems to work. It makes it fun, it makes it exciting without bogging them down with a lot of the hard technical content ahead of time. Now there's a bunch, I already went long, but there's a bunch more material here. We have integrations with the classroom. So what actually happens is the kids sit down and just play it as a game first. Then the teacher goes through very short, very high level modules about each one of these. What is an IDS versus an IPS? What are these different job roles? What does a career in this look like? And then teaches them a very simple risk management framework where then as an assignment, the kids in their groups work together and draw up an actual business plan. Now they just write it. They get copies of all the cards, copies of all the events in the deck. They know how many copies of the different events are in the deck. So they know that like having a spam campaign hit your organization is there's like 5 of those in the deck, whereas having an O-Day targeted at your organization, there's 1 of. And so they know that the likelihoods are different, and they can actually build their business plan to prioritize what they're going to invest in based on what threats it addresses, and then they play through the game again as a class. But now instead of just picking stuff and everything, they follow the business plan that they've written. And so it kind of gives them all those tools to kind of go through it. And that's all part of the exercise. And so then there's different versions of the game. There's the for educators version. There's the mass market version, which we haven't gotten to actually getting that onto shelves. I'd love to get there, but that's the plan, at least, is to be able to do it at that level.
Thanks. And the last question that Danny posed, which you might have spoken to a bit already, is how do folks who have gone through the training you described actually do in real world in responding to threats?
I'd like to say fantastically well, right? That's my bias. The problem is here for a lot of these is that we don't have a control group. We don't have a good control group in order to assess, how would they have done without this? Because for a lot of these engagements, it's not very easy to do that. Now, where I do have data is where we have previous cadres before we created this kind of gamified training, and I will say that the benefit really is noticeable, but varies drastically between these different engagements. There's different. I think the best way I can put it is the better the alignment with your learning objectives, the better the alignment of your learning objectives to what they're actually going to be asked to do in their job role, the more effective it is. Because we've had some cases where it's not, what they've been asked to be taught, and then what they end up having to do are not perfectly aligned. You're not going to see much benefit there. But where we've seen this, there's a definite marked benefit there. I can't give exact numbers because it varies drastically depending. I've talked about 8 different engagements here at least. And there's a host more, but I will absolutely say that it's been very effective everywhere that I've used it. Usually if I absolutely had to average across everything, probably in the 30 to 40% more effective than the traditional method insofar as it. But there's been some cases where it's really well aligned, where the fit is really good, where it's been in the almost twice as effective. That's in the particular case that I'm thinking of is a place where there was a over 80% attrition rate. So people just weren't completing the follow-on courses. And we were able to make a huge difference there because now they were more prepared for the follow-on courses. And actually, I will say one of the key places where I find value in this is getting more time. Time is money, and your training dollar is always short. What I always advocate, if possible, for these systems is make them available to the learners outside of the training window. Make something engaging so that when they go home, they want to do it, want to do more. And so that's where you can really get a multiplicative effect of your training dollar. Of if you can make training where they come in, they do the training and you're done, no matter how engaging it is, you still just have that window. But if you can make your training so engaging that when they go home in the evening, they continue doing the training, they continue consuming the content on their own time, that's free money. You're getting them to participate, to train themselves on their own time. And that is, I think that's the real gold. And we've seen that time and again, that if you build something compelling enough, especially if you make it either cooperative or competitive, depending on again, that's a whole different talk that I'm willing to give on the different types of learners and what speaks to them. There's a whole learning theory that and psych theory that I like to use. I use the Reese motivational profile for that. But if you can build something that speaks to their interests, to their type of gameplay, that will really hook them, you can get them to do it on their own time. And so you can get their I've literally seen teams self-organize, planning their strategy, discussing it over their lunch breaks, going in the evening when they're, it's a multi-day training. And then I find out the next day, yeah, they finished the 10 hours of training, went back to their hotel, all met in one of their hotel rooms, logged in and kept working on it for another 4 hours. Then slept for a couple hours, came back and they're like, we're ahead of the other teams. And so, that's gold as far as I'm concerned.
Any final questions? And
I have a quick question.
Yep.
So I volunteer with a group that tries to teach under-resourced middle and high school students like programming and stuff like that. And I think they might be interested in the board game. So I was wondering what the process is like, or if you still have a process for like the getting access to the educator's version of the game. Shoot
me an email. I'll be happy. I will move heaven and earth to make it happen. We'll see awesome. what hoops we have to jump through, but that's my baby. That's my passion project, is getting more young adults into the pipeline at the start. So shoot me an email, and I will be more than happy to do whatever I can to make that happen.
Thank you so much, Joe.
That goes out to anybody watching this video. I know it's going up on YouTube and so forth. Please feel free to contact me if you have an interest in utilizing any of these. I'm always happy to discuss possible collaborations, possible avenues. This addressing the pipeline issue is kind of my passion project, and so anything we can do to make that happen, it makes our country more secure. It makes us more able to respond to threats, and so let's make it happen.
Great. Thank you, Rotem, on behalf of myself and Dr. Crowley for giving this talk. It was really interesting.